Thank you so much again, and welcome the panelists. Yes, give them a warm hand. This is Nina Wormbs, and you are the professor of History of Technology at the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, here in Stockholm. This is Kimia Kazempour. You are the project manager of WWF Sweden Youth, and you're also very welcome. And this is Filip Johnsson. You are the professor of energy systems at Chalmers, and also program director for Mistra carbon. Electrification. Thank you. And this is Rob, and this is me. So let's start with the first sort of reflection. Nina, please, what goes around in your head when you listen to Andri?
It's a thunderstorm, I think.
Thunderstorm going on.
Well, I think there's so many things in this presentation about time and about understanding and about connection and love. I think about my grandmother, who was born in 1912, died in 2014. When I told her about ocean acidification, she couldn't understand it. So I'm reminded of that. This is a vast task to internalize. It's unfathomable.
And Kimia?
Well, I was thinking about this, when you said that it takes 100 years for something to really be established in people's minds, and how we look at that. Is it something that is inevitable, that we can't change or do anything about, or could we change the narrative around that and actually be able to change the narrative in 50 years or 25 years? Or are we just helpless in that? It's really interesting to think about.
Do you feel a bit sad about that?
Well, because the crisis is so urgent today, yes, it's hard to not feel sad about it or feel helpless, because I think we need to change it. We don't have a choice. If we're going to just accept that from now it's going to take 100 years to 2124, then we as humanity won't exist anymore.
So we need to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Filip, what can you add?
Well, two things, but first I just struck me that I've been to Iceland once, only once, but before I got there, I thought it was very grey. So and when I came there, I visited, it's very green, and then I realized why I thought it was I expected it to be very grey, and that was because I saw a film when I grew up on TV on Iceland. I realized because we had a black and white TV set. But I think two things. One is I really enjoyed it, but I think one is two terms: responsibility and justice. And I think to think about our responsibilities, I think that's very interesting when you look at generations. So, young generation, maybe the responsibility is towards the future, and for us, older, responsibility was what bad things we did. So all the bad things we did, but maybe not the bad things that our ancestors did. So how should we look at responsibilities? I think that's very interesting. The other thing is justice. I think that politicians and all of us, maybe we have to take the decisions that not increase, but injustice. So I think that's also something. Some reflections.
Yeah, let's come back to that. Thank you so much. I would like to start with connecting ourselves a little bit the way you did, Andri, with personal commitments, and you also talked about your grandmother, Nina. I would like to start with Kimia, and if you can take us back in time a couple of years, almost exactly, I think. Wasn't it the 16th of September, 2022?
That's right.
What happened, and what did this mean to you?
Yes, so almost exactly to this day 2 years ago, a young innocent woman was unfortunately killed in Iran for just showing a few strands of hair. And that sparked the Woman Life Freedom movement in Iran, and that also spread around the world.
Her name was Mahsa Amini, or Gina Amini.
Gina Mahsa Amini, that's right. And growing up, I was born and raised in Sweden, Gothenburg. growing up, I wasn't really, interested in politics or wasn't following what's happening in society and the news. I was kind of naive. I thought the democracy we have in Sweden is just, it's just there. Wasn't really thinking about why I'm living in Sweden, why my parents left their homeland to come here. There's a reason for everything. But when this happened 2 years ago, that really opened my eyes and made me realize that I need to get active, I need to get engaged, and that's...
May I just, because when you told me the story before, it was also so fascinating because you were in the same age as Anna.
Yes.
So exactly the same age. So,
yes.
so it could have been you.
It absolutely
could have been walking.
Me. Because I have been to Iran a few times growing up, since 2018, and now after we've been involved in the protests as much, we will not be going back, unfortunately. But I have been there, I have walked around. It's very normal to have a loose scarf on your head, even though the law says that it should be covered all the way. So she wasn't dressed in an unnormal way. She was dressed just as pretty much every other girl is in the country. But she was at the wrong place, at the wrong time. And yeah, it was very unfortunate. And unfortunately, she wasn't the first for this to happen to, and she will unfortunately not be the last. It's been many cases after her death as well.
And this sparked your engagement?
It did, yes, because it made me realize that, what is going on in society, and I need to, open my eyes and see what is happening in Sweden, what is happening in Iran, in the world. I need to be grateful for the democracy we have here. I need to fight for it, to have it, be remained, because it's not a given that it will always be around. It's something that you actively, as people, have to be engaged in and worked on, because otherwise, if you don't have a say, if you don't use your voice, then someone else will do so.
You grew up in Gothenburg, and so did you, Filip. But now let us go back in time a little bit more then, I guess. Not to be
what
rude,
do you mean?
But possibly. Are we in the 60s, maybe 1960s?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yes.
Yeah. Do we have a time? Do we have a sort of moment in time that sparked your engagement, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking that. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that when I grew up in a sort of a middle class area with detached houses, and in the 60s and 70s, the car was really, people were proud of their car, they were cleaning their cars and so on. But we never had a car.
Your family didn't have a car?
So I mean, they could have afforded it, I guess, but so I know at some point, some year, I guess I could have been 7, 8 years old, I really felt bad about we didn't have a car, so often, once in a while, I posed the question to my father when he was sitting there reading his newspaper that, Dad, and I had really figured this out, Dad, if there was a lottery and we won a Rolls-Royce car and under the condition that we were not allowed to sell it, what would we do? And of course, there's not very much escape routes after that question, so and he said, son. No, he didn't, because I had to pose the question several times, and then he said, oh, yeah, well, I guess we would keep it then. And then yes! There is a slim chance that we could have a car. But then, it sort of faded away, and then I continued to
I wonder, Filip, now when you're in the middle of a quite polarized debate in Sweden on the energy issues, if you can be helped by this talent of yours to actually ask the right questions to the decision maker.
Yeah.
Maybe you can think about that next time.
That's a good point. That's a good idea. Yeah,
you do that. Nina, please.
Well, I don't think there is an exact moment for transformation in me personally. I think it's like a spiral. You come back, you're in the same place, but it's still a different place. But I have a story that I come back to, and it's about one of my children. We normally, like I think many families, we have ham for Christmas. And we buy too much ham, so the ham has been smaller and smaller. But one thing that we really like is the day before Christmas Eve to have just a thin
crisp
slice
bread.
on
The
hard
ham,
bread and some
the mustard.
Right.
Me too.
And we were preparing, this is pre-pandemic, we were preparing the tree and other things, and then she asked me, so she's in the mid-teens, can we have ham for Christmas? And I'd never said that we couldn't. We were still eating meat. They were not vegetarians or anything. And she knew I was going to say yes. But there was something going on in her that had to do with what is right. What can I allow myself?
Is it okay?
Where are the limits? How are we going to continue? And it was extremely forceful. Because she's born in 2000. She's might be there in 2100. So I'm thinking about all these transitions that people are making, and how can we open up for a conversation that is not polarized, but just receiving and very empathetic to that kind of struggle in the tiniest thing that is a sandwich.
Andri, would you like to comment on the ham sandwich?
Yes, well, I kind of exclude Christmas from things. So, no, I have not. I have 4 children. So, I think one of my oldest son, he was kind of getting climate anxiety when I was getting a bit too deep. So I was trying not to. I was struggling with how do I frame this to the younger generation? Because also when I had my first talk for teenagers, I just presented the cold facts, and it was like, it was like I was turning off the lights in their eyes. So it's like, can I find this? And also like the 100 years are a bit too long. So I was looking, can I look for examples, and even a very superficial example of telling them that if somebody told me when I was their age that I would be Skyping my mother, from another continent, when we still had a you both have to believe in some kind of progress that is, the problem is both technological, that is in the tangible world. So I basically told them that the last 30 years were all about this virtual world, about this digitizing everything, and that was the megatrend of the last 30 years of making this. The next 30 years are all about the tangible world. So the heroes of my generation, they were all like Zuckerberg or Gates or Jobs or something. But in a way, that's kind of finished, that transition. But the next 30 years are all about the neglected tangible world, about material, building material, circular economy, consumption, food, fabric, transportation, and basically telling them that if you look at the past 100 years, the world was kind of mostly built in good intentions, you would think. Like you wanted to give something to the next generation or to your society in infrastructure and building. But now we're in this cynical position where we feel like our daily lives are not contributing, but actually undermining the future. And so many are stuck in this place where we feel like our day-to-day work is not good, or at least maybe harmful and not helpful at least. So I was telling them that the next 30 years are all about the tangible world.
It's like a conflict constantly going on, isn't it, Nina?
Yes.
Would you like to...
The conflict between understanding and action,
Yes.
do you mean? Well, it's also a conflict. I'm thinking about what you're talking about now as how generations have different goals. And we're also in a culture right now where we have certain ideas of what humanity can and cannot do, or what a person is, or what's driving us. Some of them are wrong, because we know that. We can see through history that humankind has done and have had other driving forces. It's not in our DNA. No. It's in our culture. So I think that's a challenge, right? What kind of voices are we listening to, and what do we believe in? So we're fighting multiple wars, I think. And it's not just information about nature and climate. But it's about us
Yes.
and our societies.
Yeah. Filip, sometimes we sort of tend to focus on the wrong things. I know that you are also struggling now with time in the sense of sort of investments that the nation Sweden and the EU need to do now, and the returns are so far off, so that today's politicians are not really feeling that this is what I need to do. It's not the whisper game that you gave example of, Andri. So how do you sort of discuss things like this with politicians, Filip?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a lot of things. But I think that what at least one can see from my research is about techno-economics, where we look at how we transform a lot of our infrastructure, power plants, roads, railways, and also embedded emissions in cement and concrete. And we know that we need to be climate neutral around the mid-century, and the mid-century is not, which I tend to think 50 years from now, because I guess I never accepted my age, but it's, what is it, 30 plus years. And of course, if we think about the historical turnover times of the capital stock, it's maybe 50, many things we look at, I mean, they are 50, 60 years of age, and we need somehow to combine the transformation of this with some sort of implementation of new technologies and measures. And it's not really what I often say, and not only me, but it's that the politicians is not, the challenge is not the technologies themselves, it's more about all other inbuilt in organizations and financing, financing is the other way around, it's very short term, so how we can combine this. So I think it's, I mean, this was sort of some reflections. I mean, if you are to talk to politicians, you have to be very clear. So,
do they listen to science?
I think they do, but I think I'm thinking about there is. I just asked Rob about the English translation. That there was a Finnish-Swedish philosopher, Georg Henrik von Wright, and he said something about the tyranny of the circumstances, omständigheternas diktatur in Swedish. And I think it's a lot in there. It was not about climate change, but I think it's a lot in there that we are stuck into. Even if we want to do good, maybe we live in a detached house with 2 cars or something because we have to, because our job opportunities were not exactly where we live, or the politicians, they have a certain room for maneuvering and so on. So I think that is something that is, we have to think how to handle that. So I do think that they normally listen, but of course their capacity to act is often rather limited. So
Rob?
I think those really interesting example you gave that connects with something that came out of Andri's talk. You gave many examples of pioneers. Pioneers in trying to establish democracy, the first pilot's license for a woman. There are plenty of others as well. And we then connected that with the fact that those pioneers perhaps didn't see some of their ideas realized for 100 years. We don't have 100 years for today's pioneers. So my question to anyone on the panel is, how does academia, how does policy, how does it equip these pioneers of today to make sure that, we've got the right language, that the change is happening, so that we don't come back to those glaciers and find they're completely gone. So how do we equip pioneers so that they're not just, faced with the tyranny of circumstances?
That's an easy one.
Well, I don't think we should look for pioneers.
Okay, so
I think we
look
should
for?
all be pioneers.
Okay.
We cannot look to someone else. We need to take responsibility. And there's several in the audience here. But we don't need to name them pioneers, like the ones who is the first woman flying an airplane. I think that is a thinking of a heroism that might also delay. So we don't have to wait for someone to follow. Why not be the one to follow? Rob, you're the pioneer.
Filip.
I think one one thing that I think we've been, researchers, politicians, civil society, everyone's been not very good at is to explain and show what will this zero carbon or sustainable society, what will it look like. Typically it will be some pamphlets with people bicycling in sunshine or something, but I mean it's much more than that. I mean it's maybe the way of living, the stressfulness in society, all kinds of things. I'm thinking if the politicians had to present, the national politicians, saying that within the Swedish climate political framework, if they were about to have to present a roadmap, what they with an end point, so I mean end point, but at least until say a couple of decades. I think that could help, and maybe with support from researchers. So I think that is something to me that I've been thinking of, that we have not been really good at explaining, because of course everyone in this room we sort of agree, but even we sometimes fly and so.
And also
really
there are so
difficult.
many uncertainties, I suppose, that it's hard to even do this future.
I don't think
We'll
that
come back to the future
yes,
issue.
I know,
I would like to let Andri in also on this one.
So what I've often been thinking of is, what is the difference of myself when I was young versus my children where they are now as young? The difference, I think, is also in terms of meaning. That is, I think, the collective goal of my generation in this end of history era after the fall of the Soviet Union. The meaning was only to compete in the competition of the nations over, technology and markets, etc. And whatever I wanted to choose to be, there was almost nothing with a higher meaning, you could say. If I wanted to make a car or an airplane, or if I wanted to build a house, or design something, there was no clear meaning in the air or clean urgency either. There were of course problems, so somebody could have meaning in solving AIDS or nuclear disarmament or something, but a collective meaning in the society wasn't really felt, at least not in Iceland when I was younger. So I would say that there should be a very deep meaning, and that's why I think that in the educational system, just like you have on the wall in your classroom, you have like Leonardo da Vinci, the man, you have the organs of the body, you have the birds, or you have like the periodic table of elements. You should have this trajectory to zero as almost like a collective goal of a generation, which is, because when you're educating yourself, you should educate yourself within the meaning of reaching that, and then of course in the meaning of biodiversity, and of course then in the meaning of human rights, which is, I feel like, is a bigger struggle now than was when I was young. So I would say there are more meanings, not available, but urgently needed when you're reaching young people. And meaning can be a very powerful thing. There's so much drive in meaning, because there's nothing less motivating than trying to study math without a meaning, or whatever field you go into.
How old is your daughter?
Have to
do the calculation.
There's so many.
Okay.
And they're always having birthdays. So it's
the one that talked to your grandmother.
She's 16 now.
So she's 16
She
now, okay.
just started gymnasium, and
Okay,
then I have an
right.
18 and a 22 and a 27.
So you have. So I was thinking, you are 24,
Yes.
Kimia. So maybe you can be. You could have been.
Yes, you could be my second child.
Exactly, you could be second. So let's test this on you then. How important is it that your workplace or what you choose to do in life, that it has a deeper meaning, that it actually provides something for this transition and so on? What do you think around this, and how do you speak to your friends about this, and what do you collect there?
Right. Personally, for me, of course, I value that very much, to have meaning in the work I do, and it's absolutely something I strive to, but I do see a trend around me with my friends and other young people that, when there's harder financial times, for example, that makes people, want to ignore all what's happening around the world and just focus on themselves and their survival, and when that happens, their priorities shift. And, and also when a lot of shame is being used in this context, for example, this with when you shame people for flying, airplanes, when it becomes really like all or nothing, people tend to just want to have ignorance, because the ignorance is bliss. And then they just shut down and they don't want to know about it, they don't want to read about it, they just feel like it's hopeless for them and leave the work to others. So it's important to find a balance in that, so that people can both live their lives and not feel so restricted, but also feel that they don't have to be perfect, but they are welcome to do the best they can. Because it can be I think young people can feel like if they're not contributing 100%, it's not worth it.
Nina,
Not just young people.
exactly.
I think you're onto something really, really important. This idea that either you're a saint or you're the opposite. And that's a terribly dangerous idea of transition, I think. It's much, much better that everybody does something than a few do everything, right? So if we could change that idea of that you have to be perfect.
Right.
We're not. We're human beings, for God's sake. We're not perfect.
Yes.
So I'm not sure why we get that feeling that you need to do everything right to be able to have.
You actually did a study on flygskam, fly shame.
Well, we did a study on
Yeah.
people who stopped flying
Yes.
for reasons of climate change and so their transition to doing that. And it was a very promising and I think rewarding study because it showed change. It showed how information and conscience and love and other things could work for these people or had worked for these particular people, right?
But even them, I mean, even they had a conflict going on constantly, of course.
It's super hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. This is no easy road, right? So maybe that's also a thing, talking about our children and the children of our grandfathers maybe. Everything is supposed to be so easy. And it's supposed to happen very fast. And maybe we need to realize that it's not easy. And it's hard, and it might take some time, and we might fail, but we need to continue anyway.
May I just ask you about pioneers, because you didn't like them. So
Sorry.
do you think that role models play an important role, or?
Yes, I do. I think that's a different thing than a pioneer, but I think that's because I'm an historian. I think the pioneering thing is a hero. A role model is not necessarily a hero. A role model can fail. A pioneer cannot fail. Then it doesn't.
You can be a failing pioneer.
Well, a failing pilot, I was thinking. Yes. That would then be no good thing. No, the role models I think are good and important. And they need to be not perfect, because otherwise they're not role models.
We've talked a little about the role of research and science in policymaking and also in this transformation. I was wondering if we can deepen, if we have a few minutes, when it comes to knowledge and also try to bridge it to meaning, if we can. Because I wonder if it's sort of, I mean, I remember where I was when I talked to Bert Bolin, the meteorologist, and I actually understood climate change. I felt when I was there in this room that, okay, so now everything I do from now must be completely, it's a shift. And I remember I looked out on the green trees and I just felt like part of something bigger and yet so small. We all have those moments. And I wonder, is it possible to go back, to not understand something that I have understood? And this is something for you, Nina, to sort of unravel, but also for you, the role of science in this transformation. Nina, would you like to start, and then please, let's see where this
Well, for
gets
some
us.
people, at least in our studies, science could be, or information can be that kind of eye-opener, and Bert Bolin was that to you. But sometimes it's something else. It's a realization of generations, of children maybe, or of love, or something that sort of pulls the veil in a way. And then you realize, and life is never the same. But I think Kimia was pointing to something with her friends who do understand. They did understand,
Exactly.
but they're stuck, and they feel bad. So how are we going to sort of embrace them and help them do those things that they are able to do, instead of sort of dismissing them because they're not perfect? So I think the understanding is just one step. We need to act, and we might also need to have non-action, right? To do less, and there are many things that are at hand. But understanding is not enough if you don't have the tools of moving out of where you're at.
Filip.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, yeah, knowledge is, I agree with Nina, it's just one part of it. I mean, then it's what the expectations from you, again, maybe the tyranny of the circumstances, what the expectation from society, and exactly what is in focus. Also now, of course, at these times we have, also in politics, we have other, if you look at the EU, what they focus on, for instance, I mean, it was very much about climate and green transition. Now it's security supply, and all these supply chains, vulnerability also. And I think what the responsibility for society and what we can hope of is that values and norms, they change over time. And if we can sort of steer society into hopefully get the values and norms, what is status? It's not the latest makeup or a motorcycle or something, it's something else. But I think that's really a challenge. And particularly at those times when we tend to, I missed to sort of grab what you said before, that there is this polarization in the political debate, at least in my field, and politicians tend to create. I mean, I'm not blaming politicians because we have it's just that the society sort of foster that they debate, and we debate often pseudo debates. It's not the real issue that needs to be debated. In my field, it's like nuclear power versus wind power, which is a sort of pseudo debate. So I think to be able to create an environment where we can discuss the right things, so to say. But again, I think one have to hope for this change and values and norms. It's not something you can change overnight. But,
Rob, would you like to add something there?
I mean, something that really strikes me that we're nudging towards is Andri gave this example of going to a classroom and having a sort of something there that shows the trajectory to net zero, how we take care of biodiversity, that gives meaning. And that maybe that's perhaps, we talk about the knowledge action gap often, the knowledge implementation gap in some cases, but actually that meaning is perhaps the missing connector, the missing thing that provides the frame. And but how, it seems very sort of paternalistic, very top-down to sort of create this meaning in that way. How do we do that in a way that actually galvanizes everybody to be a pioneer and for the role models really to take to step forward?
Would you like to start, Andri?
Yes, so what I also think is, because we're in a mindset, so then comes global warming as a threat or a urge for transition, and still in the mindset, so we say, okay, we need transition. That is, we need electric cars. That is, we don't that. So when we think like, we often have the illusion that we're going to take this society and just power it with another energy source, but not that the change will be more fundamental. And so it's like this illusion that we will seamlessly park our Benz and dance into the Tesla. And like this will be effortless, and it will only be in terms of technical upgrades. That is, everything will be better, cleaner, but we won't do it until it is on that level. So sometimes I've done an experiment, like I ask people, okay, do you agree that, for example, climate change is a greater challenge than COVID, for example? And they say, yes, of course, it's much bigger. And then I ask, okay, name me the top 10 annoying things you did for COVID. And they could talk 10 things, they could tell you 100 things, and they could talk for days about stories and everything that was disrupted for COVID. And then I ask, okay, name me the top 10 things where you have been disrupted for climate change. And then they're like, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, just the top 10. Yeah, it's coming. The plastic straws. Yeah, okay. Very radical. My uncle bought a Tesla. Okay, that's sacrifice. So we are kind of entitled. That is, we have not taken on, anything that is close to not hugging your grandmother for a year, or not going to a disco, or not going to the cinema. Just we haven't come close to that kind of challenging our daily lives for this cause of climate change. So that's what I'm saying about the language and paradigm, that we're still dealing with the crisis without entering the paradigm of it as a reality. It's more like an abstract issue, traffic lights, climate change, construction area, so So I'm not calling for an authoritarian leadership, but I'm saying that future generations will see me like you would see a person that was saying, like we were talking about how we don't hit our slaves anymore with a whip, but just with a softer device. And that's why we are so good, because we don't hit them anymore. But instead of the paradigm of not having slaves, if you get what I mean. So I hope it's not so basically, in hindsight, I would have been a hideous person just being in that paradigm, and my books would be cancelled and everything.
But I was just thinking of that, Andri, since we're now coming to an end with this panel soon, but haven't we been trying to discuss something without having the language? Because that is the language of the last paradigm. We're trying to sort of bridge over to something here. And I was just thinking, what if 2160, this panel discussion was played up? What would they recognize? What would they say? That was interesting. What are they talking about there? So in one way, I just feel that thanks to you, we have touched a little bit closer to something than normal or the usual panels going on, just, bouncing the arguments in one's heads. We've tried to understand each other, and I really like that. But Rob, do you think we have time for a short bridge to the next panel?
I'm sure we do.
30 seconds, please.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that really struck me from what Andri was saying and has come out of this was when you talked about nature entering human time, and that why we've tried to reconnect and understand to some extent that geological time, and how our activities and our approach to living has pushed it into a different phase, a different speed, that perhaps the challenge in the future, what we need to not only whisper to the children, to our children, but also work very hard throughout society, is that reconnecting with nature in order to allow it to slow down again. That, I think, is the thing that came out to me really strongly from your talk and some of the things that we've discussed here.
We will continue during the upcoming break as well. I would like you to join me in a warm hand to this fantastic panel.